I had always loved the ocean. The sound of the waves, the salty air, and the feeling of freedom it gave me filled my heart with joy. One weekend, I decided to go fishing alone. I packed my gear and set out early in the morning. The sun was just rising, painting the sky with soft pink and orange colors. As I drove to the coast, I felt excited. The calm water awaited me, and I looked forward to a peaceful day on my boat. I arrived at the small harbor where my boat was docked. After checking my gear, I pushed the boat into the water and climbed aboard. I started the engine, and soon I was out on the open sea, surrounded by endless blue. I loved being out here. The ocean was vast, and the only sound I could hear was the gentle hum of my engine and the splashing of waves against the boat. I fished for a few hours, catching some small fish, but I wanted to go further out. The thrill of the unknown excited me. I turned the boat toward a spot I had heard about from other fishermen. They said it was good for bigger catches, but it was also known for being mysterious. As I navigated the waters, I noticed a thick fog rolling in. It came out of nowhere, wrapping around my boat like a heavy blanket. The sun vanished behind the clouds. I slowed down, squinting into the fog, trying to see where I was going. Suddenly, something appeared in the distance. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but as I got closer, I realized it was a ship. It was old and worn, covered in rust, with tattered sails hanging like ghostly rags. The ship seemed to float silently, almost as if it were waiting for me. I had never seen a vessel like it before. Curiosity pulled me closer. I tied my boat to the side of the ghostly ship and climbed aboard. The deck creaked beneath my feet. It was as if the ship itself was alive, breathing the salty air of the sea. The air felt heavy, and I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the strange feeling. As I stepped onto the ship, I noticed everything was covered in dust. The wood was gray and rotting, and the sails were faded and full of holes. I wandered around, exploring the deck and peering into the ship's cabin. Inside, the space was dark and musty. Old furniture lay covered in sheets, and cobwebs hung from every corner. I found an old lantern on a table, and I picked it up. It was heavy and cold, but it still had some oil left inside. I lit it, and the flickering flame pushed back the shadows, revealing more of the cabin. I felt a mix of excitement and fear as I explored. Each creak of the floorboards sent chills down my spine. In one corner, I saw an old chart spread out on a table. It was yellowed with age, with strange markings and symbols I couldn't understand. I felt drawn to it, but something made me hesitate. I could not shake the feeling that I was intruding on something sacred. I continued my exploration, wandering through narrow hallways. The ship felt eerie and abandoned, but I also felt a strange connection to it. I could hear the soft sound of water splashing against the hull, but it almost sounded like whispers. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I was alone on this ship, or so I thought. Suddenly, I heard a noise coming from below deck. My heart raced, and I paused, listening intently. The sound was faint but persistent, a soft thudding noise, like footsteps. I felt a surge of fear. Was someone else on the ship? I hesitated, but decided I needed to find out what was happening. I slowly made my way down the dark staircase, holding my lantern high. The air grew colder as I descended. The light flickered, casting shadows on the walls. I reached the bottom and found myself in a narrow hallway, lined with doors. I could still hear the thudding noise, but it seemed to be coming from the last door on the right. My hands trembled as I approached the door. I took a deep breath and turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a small cabin. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and I could barely see anything. I stepped in, my lantern lighting the space. To my shock, the room was filled with old furniture, but the most unsettling thing was a table in the center. It was set for dinner, with plates and cups arranged neatly, as if waiting for guests. But the food on the plates was rotten, covered in mold and decay. It was as if time had stopped here, frozen in a moment long gone. I backed away. The thudding noise had stopped, replaced by an overwhelming silence. I turned to leave when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow moved in the far corner of the room. I froze, my blood running cold. I was not alone. I stood still, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow slowly took shape, revealing a figure, a man dressed in tattered clothes, his face pale and sunken. His eyes were hollow, staring right at me. I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. The figure raised a hand, pointing at me, as if he wanted me to join him. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The noise echoed through the cabin, and the figure vanished in an instant, leaving me alone in the darkness. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I turned and ran back up the stairs, my heart racing. I needed to get off this ship. As I reached the deck, I looked back at the fog-covered ocean. The boat I had tied up was still there, but the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping around it like a shroud. I grabbed my gear, my hands shaking. I needed to leave, but something held me back. The ship felt alive, as if it wanted me to stay. I turned to face the ghostly ship once more. The old wood creaked in the silence, and the sails fluttered in the cold wind. I could still feel the presence of the man below deck. It felt like he was watching me, waiting for me to return. I took one last look at the old ship and jumped into my boat. I started the engine and pushed away from the ghost ship. As I looked back, I saw the figure standing on the deck, watching me leave. I could hardly breathe as I steered my boat away, the fog closing in around me. I glanced over my shoulder, but the ship had already disappeared into the mist, as if it had never been there at all. The ride back to shore felt like an eternity. I was shaken, unable to shake off the fear that had gripped me. What had I just experienced? The ghost ship, the figure. It felt real, yet I wondered if I had imagined it all. I finally reached the harbor, and as I tied up my boat, I glanced back at the water. The fog was beginning to lift, but the memory of the ship lingered in my mind. Days passed, and I tried to forget about my encounter. I went about my life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with me. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I thought I could hear whispers, the echo of voices calling from the ocean. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the shadow of the figure haunting my dreams. I decided to return to the harbor. I needed to know if the ship was still out there. Maybe I had imagined it all. As I approached the water, my heart raced. The ocean was calm, and the sun was shining brightly. I pushed my boat into the water and set off, my mind racing with thoughts of what I might find. As I navigated the familiar waters, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. Would I find the ghost ship again? Would I see the figure once more? As I reached the spot where I had encountered the ship, I felt a strange pull. The ocean was still, but I could sense something beneath the surface. I waited, my heart pounding. And then, out of the fog, the ship appeared again, just as I remembered it. The same rusted hull, the same tattered sails. It looked more real than ever. This time, I felt compelled to approach. I tied my boat to the ship once more and climbed aboard. The familiar chill filled the air, and I felt the weight of the ship's history surrounding me. I walked through the cabin again, feeling more at ease. I approached the table, and to my surprise, the food was fresh now, steaming as if it had just been prepared. I stood there, confused and unsure. What was happening? I felt the presence of the figure nearby, watching me. I turned to face him, and this time he was clearer. His expression was not one of anger or fear, but sadness. I could feel his pain, the weight of his past. Suddenly, I understood. The ship was a vessel of lost souls, trapped in their own time. They were waiting for someone to help them find peace. I reached out my hand, hoping to comfort him, but as I did, the ship began to tremble. The walls shook, and I felt a rush of energy fill the air. The figure reached out, and I felt an overwhelming force pulling me towards him. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, the ship was gone. I found myself back on my boat, floating alone.